What's shakin' bacon? We're back with another meat cutting video. Finally. Let's learn how to cut up a whole top sirloin. And we got all this for under $100. All of it. This isn't even everything. This is just the prettiest stuff. Top sirloins are also called top butts. And if that doesn't give away where to find it on the cow, I don't know what will. You'll find the top sirloin near the back end of the cow, right next to the short loin, which is where you're getting your porterhouses, T-bones, New York strips, and tenderloin steaks. So you can see that I have two different pieces here, and that's just because I could only find a top sirloin already separated into its two main parts, which are the cap, or the sirloin cap, also known as the picanha or the coolet. I've seen that some places call it the rump cap, which is interesting to me because I was taught that the rump comes from a different part of the cow, but tomato, potato. And the center. Now, when you buy the center, the tag will probably say something like top sirloin, center cut, denuded, or top sirloin, denuded. The word denuded just means exposed, stripped, or uncovered. So it's referred to as such because the cap has been removed from it. This is what it would look like if it were still whole. Now keep in mind, this cap did not come off of this center, so the size is a little off and they don't match up completely, but this is about how it would look if it were still whole and there would be a seam of fat that runs between the two. I was a little disappointed that I couldn't find a whole top sirloin to show you guys because removing the cap from the center is actually a lot of fun. But it is easier if you're able to buy them separately for a couple of reasons. One being that while you can cut steaks out of a whole top sirloin, with how big the pieces tend to be, it can be really challenging to slice even steaks. Secondly, is that when these are still connected, the grain of these two pieces run in different directions. Let's get to cutting. We're gonna start with the cap or picanha. Picanhas are the beef king of Brazilian cuisine, and I think the rise in their popularity just across the board is a big reason why wholesalers are selling the cap and the center separately. Most of the time you'll see picanhas cooked whole, but you can also cut them into cap steaks like we are going to do today. We're going to start by flipping our picanha over and removing any silver skin that we see. It's just really tough and you can't chew through it. It is not lacking in flavor though, so I would recommend keeping it and throwing it into stocks and soups. To remove the silver skin, I like to take the tip of my knife and slide underneath it as close to the top as possible, and then angling my knife slightly towards the silver skin, slice out to create essentially like a handle for us to hold on to while we remove the rest of the silver skin. If you're having trouble keeping a hold on this makeshift handle we've created, you can use a paper towel to improve your grip, or a cut glove will also help with that, as well as protect your hand from your knife. I talk about cut gloves in my top Butchery Tools video, so I'll link that somewhere. And then also down below if you're interested in seeing that. I'm going to take a hold of our little handle, place my knife right underneath, and then angle my knife upwards towards the silver skin. We're pretty much scraping the meat off of the silver skin, leaving it behind on the piece where we want it. So, angle it upwards a little bit, and then I just like to wiggle the piece of silver skin and my knife a little bit. It'll just kind of like slide through, just like that. Just remove any more that we see in the same way. A little bit of silver skin left behind is not like a super big deal, but we want to get as much of it as we can. Now that we've got our cap all cleaned up, we can take a look and see that our grain is running this way pretty clearly. So before we cut our steaks, I am going to cut about a ½ inch or so off of the face of our piece. This is the face, the side that we're gonna cut our steaks off of. It's usually whichever side is the largest, flattest, and perpendicular to the grain. The reason that we are going to slice a little bit off before we start cutting our steaks is so that our first steak is nice and even on both sides. You can cut this way, or you can turn it around and have the piece that you're cutting off face you. It's really personal preference, whatever is the most comfortable for you. Sometimes it's a little bit more than a ½ inch, sometimes a little less. Sometimes you don't have to do it at all. This little piece that we cut off and just stick to the side for now. But now you can see our face is nice and flat. However this one was removed, they did not do the prettiest of jobs. It happens. Now we're just gonna slice steaks out of this across the grain all the way down. As far as thickness goes, whatever you want is correct. I'm gonna go with maybe like an inch, maybe a little less. Damn, it's not gonna be as pretty as it would be. Because the cap is triangular in shape, the steaks will vary in width, but thickness is really what impacts cook time the most. And then when you get down to the end where there's not really enough meat to cut another steak, then we'll just set this aside to work with later. You can see all the beautiful marbling. I'm so excited about these. Now that our steaks are all sliced, this is the time that I would recommend you trim any fat that you would like. Usually I don't trim any fat when I'm cutting for myself at home, but this fat cap was thick. I would recommend keeping about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch of fat still on your steaks. I will definitely be keeping this fat because I can render it down into useful cooking fat, as well as sometimes I'll just throw a piece of fat into a pan and let it render out before I saute or sear something. We didn't really cut a lot of these at work. We didn't really sell the cap steaks when we did have them out. If there was ever a time that we had to remove the cap because we desperately needed top sirloin fillets or something, we would try to sell it as a picanha separately. A lot of times they wouldn't sell if they were like that. They would really only sell if they were in the cryovac still. So actually selling the cap and the center separately is a lot more economical and less wasteful for the store. Moving on to the center cut, which is a little bit more complex than the cap. We have the face here. And then on the other side, this is where it actually butts up against the short loin. And as we saw earlier, this is where the cap was when it was still connected. If we flip it over, we will see some pretty tough silver skin, just like we saw on the cap, and we are going to take care of that now. Top sirloin was one of the very first pieces I was taught how to cut. It was a pretty big deal for me because, like I said earlier, whole top sirloin steaks, and we cut quite a few of those, can be pretty challenging because top sirloins are just really, really big. So it takes a lot of strength. And at the time I had just started my job, I didn't have all my meat cutter strength yet. I had to build that up. So it was really challenging for me to get even steaks. I was kind of obsessed with mastering a top sirloin for a long time. Now we could go ahead and just cut across the grain and cut steaks out of this whole piece. Instead, we are going to follow this line right here and separate this section from this section. Most of the time it's referred to as the 1/3 and the 2/3. Ratio-wise, this is a little bit more than 2/3, but meat cutting, it's a lot of semantics. I'm just going to slice straight and following it as best as I can. So we're going to set aside this bigger piece. And what we are looking at right now is a sirloin chateau. It's the roast version of a top sirloin fillet. And if sirloin chateau sounds familiar, it's because a tenderloin roast is called a chateaubriand. I've heard people refer to top sirloin fillets as a poor man's tenderloin steak. Sure. I would say though that a sirloin chateau might be a better option than an eye round roast if you're making one of those like budget beef Wellingtons. Just a thought. So we are going to take our sirloin chateau and we're going to slice it into top sirloin fillets. I like to cut mine pretty thick, probably like 2 inches thick most of the time. Look at how pretty they are. And this right here, this is why people get them confused with tenderloin steaks. That and the fact that a lot of times people will just look quickly at a pack of steaks, see the word fillet, and buy it thinking it's just an excellently priced filet mignon. And it's not. So make sure you're reading your labels. They are tasty steaks. They are tender. There we go. I also learned while researching for this video that top sirloin fillets are also called baseball cuts or baseball steaks. That one was new to me. If you call these steaks or a whole top sirloin anything different than what I've mentioned today, let me know in the comments. I'd love to learn. So since I wasn't super careful in slicing the 1/3 from the 2/3, there is a little bit of silver right here. We're just gonna cut it off. You can also leave it on and cut it off after the cooking. If you can see a little bit of silver right there. Just gonna slice it off. This looks so good. Moving on to the other 2/3, we are going to slice it up just against the grain. As you can see, the grain is running pretty clearly this way. And then when the cap is on it, the cap's grain runs this way. Interesting, just interesting. Like we did for the cap, we're going to face it up a little bit and just slice a smidgen off of the face to flatten it out. And there's also just a ton of grizzle right here. You want to cut in like a 1/2 inch to 1 inch really, so that we bypass all of this grizzle right there, that much. See, like that's no fun in a steak. Like everything, cut these steaks as thick or as thin as you want. I'm gonna go for like 1 inch to 1.5 inches. I might do a couple thinner than that just for some variety. We'll come back in and kind of clean that up. We used to label every steak that came from the center as a top sirloin fillet. So like this would be a top sirloin fillet and this would be a top sirloin fillet. That's not actually correct. This is a top sirloin fillet. This is a real one. It's semantics. Really, this one would be more correct if it were labeled as a top sirloin steak or a top sirloin center cut. But like I said, meat cutting's a lot of what someone likes to call it and other people also like to call it. It's very regional. It's very subjective. It really is. It should be more standardized than it is, but it's not. And then we will put this chunk aside. Now will be the time to trim and cut off really anything that's undesirable. So I'm gonna take this time and just cut out this little grizzly part right here and throw it in with the trim that I will save for stock. You don't have to do this, obviously. You can leave it in and just cut around it, you know, when you eat it. It's all personal preference, but that's the best part about cutting your own meat at home, is that you get to make all of the decisions. This top sirloin looks great. The marbling in this thing is awesome. I've seen top sirloins with like no marbling in them. So this is beautiful. I picked out a good one. I'm gonna go stick these in the fridge and we're gonna deal with the trim. 1 second. Now for the leftover odd bits, the oddly shaped ends or little bits of trim that we cut off, we can do a lot with this. We can trim off the fat and cut everything down into chunks for stew or kebabs, strips for stir fry. We can throw all of it in a grinder and make ground sirloin. There's a lot of options. Or we can leave them just like this and decide what to do with them later. The world is our oyster, as we know here. I'm gonna go ahead and trim everything up, and I'll probably opt for cutting everything into strips for stir fry, just because we eat a lot of stir fry in this house. That's really a go-to meal for us, so do with it what you will. Merchandising the trim into different products that we could sell was always one of my favorite parts of my job. Having an affinity for taking the extra pieces that kind of look like they don't belong anywhere, they look a little undesirable, and turning them into something useful, I feel like is incredibly on brand for me. This is the part that we cut off the face of the 2/3 part of our center cut with this massive piece of grizzle running through it. So I'm just trying to separate the meat out. This is a big reason why I'd recommend to keep like any of the grizzle you cut off or the silver skin, is because there's always going to be meat left behind no matter how good at this you are. And you may as well get value out of every piece of something you bought, you know? If you're ever shopping at the store and you see a pack of stir fry strips, they'll say usually round for stir fry or top sirloin for stir fry. It's often made out of things like this. So chunks for stew, strips for stir fry, kebab meat too. A lot of the times they are actually just merchandised trim, byproducts of steaks and roasts and things like that. Now that we have everything cut up, I'm gonna take a second to clean up and then we can talk pricing and cooking methods. Personally, I think top sirloin is one of the most versatile pieces of meat that you can buy. It's on the leaner side if that's your preference, but it also has enough fat to offer that moisture and flavor. You can cook a top sirloin steak just about any way you can think of, whether that be broiling, grilling, searing, reverse searing, our personal favorite, or even smoking, and that goes for everything that we cut today. And like I said earlier, picanhas are often kept whole and barbecued. Sirloin is great for stir fries and kebabs. I would recommend a quicker cooking method to avoid overcooking and drying out the meat, but I've also had some pretty banging slow smoked sirloin. So overall, it's just an awesome subprimal that offers a bunch of affordable cuts for you to experiment with and see what you like. As far as pricing goes, like I told you, we got everything today for less than $100. I think it was right around $85 total, I wanna say, which in today's economy, to fill up your freezer is awesome. Now, would you believe me if I told you that the first time I bought a top sirloin to cut at home, I got it for $54? And that was only a couple years ago. So inflation really got to the top sirloin. And fun fact, top sirloin is actually the first subprimal that I ever bought to cut up at home. Around where we are now, I found that the price range for choice grade top sirloin steaks, whether that be full ones or fillets, ranges about $10 to $15 a pound at grocery stores and right around $9 a pound at wholesalers like Sam's Club or Costco. For whole top sirloins, I found that the price ranges about $9 to $14 at grocery stores and about $6 to $8 at wholesalers. This isn't factoring sales though, which are always your friend, and in my experience, sirloin goes on sale pretty regularly, so just keep an eye out for your local store ads. Overall, top sirloins are one of our absolute favorite subprimals for its affordability and versatility. There are even more ways to break this bad boy down that we couldn't cover in this video. But I hope you enjoyed and learned something. Thank you so much for watching, and please leave us a like, a comment, and subscribe for more bartending and butchery. And until next time. My water bottle matches my outfit. Can you see that I'm sweating? This feels like I'm building a charcuterie board of raw meat. So we're just going that way. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's literally right. Yep, can't go that way. With this. I left the door open. Fuck. Oh, okay. Flynn is barking. Ignore that. Now that we have all of our steaks. Oh wait, no. I forgot about one. I'm forgetting about the trim. Shit. That was not bad. We'll do it again. Let's run it back one more time. We did this. Fruits of labor right here. Now I get to vacuum seal all